A major New South Wales regional centre has been forced back into lockdown this morning. The Yass Valley Council area, which takes in several towns to Canberra's north, was locked down at midnight, just 3 days after restrictions were eased. In Sydney, mayors from COVID hotspots in the city's west and southwest will finally hold a meeting with the state's Premier, nearly 3 months after the crisis began, and it's expected to be a fiery affair.
Further south, Victoria's state government has construction workers in its sights after new figures showed nearly 1 in 7 cases in Melbourne's growing outbreak are linked to builders. The crackdown comes as many employers, including gaming giant Crown, weigh up mandatory vaccinations for both staff and customers. Let's get more from our reporters, Lara Himes in Sydney, Steph Ferrier in Melbourne and Madeline Austin on the New South Wales ACT border. Good morning all. Madeline, starting with you, and tell us about Yass's situation.
Yes, well, Yass only come out of lockdown midnight on Saturday night, but they've been thrust back into lockdown last night after a positive COVID-19 case has been detected yesterday. Now, the alarm was first raised when COVID fragments were found in the sewerage, but the community was holding out hope that the inevitable wouldn't come to fruition, but of course that has happened. So some really tough news for those residents who had just gotten out of lockdown and were enjoying some of those newer freedoms, and to have it snatched away so quickly, quite hard. But Yass is a tight-knit community who have been always ready and willing to do the right thing, to stay home, to stop the spread of COVID. So hopefully after these 14 days, which they won't be allowed to leave home unless it's for an essential reason, they will hopefully be able to come out of that without any spread through the community. And now, as for over the border in Canberra, lockdown is also the topic of conversation. Chief Minister Andrew Barr will give an update today at 11:45, and he'll be outlining the pathway forward and giving a decision as to whether Canberra will come out of lockdown on Friday, as it is scheduled to do. Now, it's not clear what that decision will be. Yesterday, we had 13 positive cases. 10 of those were in the community, and that has been a main concern for ACT Health throughout this outbreak. The risk of transmission obviously really high with those cases out in the community, but we'll have a clearer image of what the next few weeks will look like for Canberra when we hear from the Chief Minister later today.
Keenly anticipated media conference indeed, Madeline, thank you. Lara, to you in Sydney, it could be a pretty fiery gathering when the mayors of those 12 local government areas hit hard by lockdown meet the Premier.
Well, these mayors, Michael, say that they've long wanted the ear of Premier Gladys Berejiklian. They said they want to air their grievances in relation to the lockdown, the way that it's been implemented. We understand that there'll be 2 areas of contention that are likely to be discussed: the lockdown itself, the restrictions, and also the affiliated easing of those restrictions with that, and also the curfew. Now, the curfew is still in place for COVID hotspots. It means that residents cannot leave their home from the hours of 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. unless it's for an emergency. There's also a push to change the way that COVID hotspots are identified. Now, currently, they're done by council boundaries. However, there has been some talk that whether or not that should be identified by suburbs, or even changing the criteria further if some areas have high vaccination rates, if they need to be considered as part of a COVID hotspot region. We've heard from one mayor this morning who states that the uptake in vaccination in his particular area has been so good that maybe Burwood, for example, should be excluded from the COVID hotspot definition.
Our residents are doing the right thing by complying with COVID restrictions. Our residents are stepping up and getting vaccinated. Over 80% of my community has now had their first vaccination, which is amongst the highest rates in the country. So the Premier needs to be rewarding communities like Burwood that are doing the right thing.
Burwood Mayor John Faker, thank you, Lara. Now to you, Steph, in Melbourne. There's a real push, isn't there, in Victoria for mandatory vaccinations in some industries?
Good morning, Michael. Yes, tradies have been put on notice here, with the state's construction industry warned that its permitted worker status is now on the line, and that is because 13% of the state's currently active 3,500 cases can be linked back to construction workers. That's because they're young, so many haven't been vaccinated yet, and they're highly mobile. So health authorities are going to launch a vaccination and enforcement blitz, and that means that from today, workers will be able to access walk-in appointments for vaccine. That is at all the state-run hubs. Also, for priority bookings, there'll be around 20,000 Pfizer doses and unlimited AstraZeneca doses available for them. And at the same time, there'll also be compliance teams going out and really cracking down on any construction workers that aren't following the rules. Now, this comes at the same time as the operators of Victoria's largest employer, Crown Resorts, announces that they are going to be pushing towards mandatory vaccinations for their 20,000 strong workforce, and also introduce a no jab, no entry policy for many of those customers that come along to Crown Resorts across Australia. The chief executive says that so far they have been encouraging people to go and get vaccinations among their staff, but now it's time to take a much more proactive stance. So they're offering time off and paid leave for people who are going to be going and getting their vaccinations from within Crown, and those who have already done so will be rewarded with a $50 voucher. And employee surveys show that 60% already have received at least one dose. So these moves come as the state records 472 new local cases. We're about to get today's daily tally as well. This is the highest tally that we've seen so far in this outbreak, and the largest tally as well for more than a year.
Steph, Lara, Madeline, thank you all for the updates there.